What's up, y'all? Welcome into Grind City Media's Draft Board Breakdown presented by Southland Casino. I'm Lang Whitaker, joined by Gary Parrish. As always, as we get you ready for the NBA draft coming up on June 25th, we have talked about Cooper Flagg. We have talked about Ace Bailey and Dylan Harper, the guys from Rutgers. And then we were talking about who else is in this next tier, and you mentioned a bunch of these guys all went to Duke.
Well, there's at least two other projected lottery picks who played at Duke this past season, and then another interesting prospect who was on his way to Duke before he went to the NBA Draft Combine, blew up there, and decided to remain in the 2025 NBA Draft. We, of course, are talking about Kon Knueppel, Khaman Maluach, and Cedric Coward, who played last season at Washington State, had committed to Duke.
Only played 7 games, though, right?
And did enough in those 7 games and in the NBA Combine to, I think, solidify his status as a expected first-round pick. So, yeah, Cooper Flagg is going to be the most high-profile Duke Blue Devil to have his name called on draft night. But you're also going to hear Kon Knueppel, Kaman Malawatch, and the guy who was supposed to be a future Blue Devil in Cedric Coward.
Before we get to these guys specifically, I just wanted to ask a Duke question because, you know, for years the Duke had all these incredible 5-star players go through there, and the knock was like, well, they don't really become superstars in the NBA. They're good, they're fine, they have great careers. But how does today's Duke program prepare these guys for playing in the NBA?
Well, first off, you're just surrounded by excellence at all times. I mean, it's a thing coaches say all the time when they're trying to recruit to a place like Duke or when John Calipari was at Kentucky. There was about a decade where it was all Kentucky and Duke, 1 and 2 in the recruiting rankings, almost without exception. It happened more often than it didn't. And whether it was Mike Krzyzewski or John Calipari, they would say things like, the great thing about coming here is that even in your practices, you're playing against other pros. Like you're having to guard other pros. You're having to score on other pros. And so you're getting it every day. Other programs, you can go to them, and if you happen to play us, then you get to play against some pros. But you're not going to get to do it every day. But you come here and you're doing it every day. At Duke, it's just true that they have as many, if not more, NBA prospects than anybody else annually. And this past season was no exception. That team was loaded, the betting favorite to win the national championship. And still in this moment, even though they didn't win the national championship, they're ranked number 1 at KenPom. That Duke team went down as one of the greatest efficiency teams in the history of college basketball. They just came up a couple of wins short, but they were loaded with talent. And that level of talent within the program at all times, I think does help prepare people for the next level. And now we're getting to a point where you can't talk about a lack of star stuff because, like, Kyrie came through there, Zion came through there,
Banchero,
Paolo came through there. They're starting to remove that.
Tatum,
Jason Tatum came through there. They're starting to remove, if not have already entirely removed, that label from their program completely. It is something people said for a while, but it's starting to go away because the proof is the proof.
Well, you mentioned last season's team being so good, and Cooper Flagg obviously was the head of the snake on that team, but these other guys had big roles on that team too. And let's start with Kaman Malawatch, the big man from South Sudan who came to Duke, and I think of these guys, I don't know, I probably had the lowest expectations. I thought he's more of a development guy. It's going to take him a year or two. And now he's already being talked about as a top 10, draft pick.
I think coming to Duke, people looked at him as he might be more of a prospect than a player. I say this all the time when we're talking about people entering college. Is he a prospect or a player? Sometimes they're both. Like Zion was clearly both. He was a great player and a great prospect. But sometimes great prospects are not great players. Carter Bryant would be an example of this. Played at Arizona this year. Just a nice role player at Arizona. Incredible prospect because everybody's looking for 3-and-D wings, and he measures the right way, and he can move the right way, and there's some advanced defensive stuff that really pops off the page, and he's a really interesting prospect, could go in the top 10. But he was a mostly irrelevant player, or at least not an All-American level player at Arizona. Great prospect, not a great player, at least at that point in time. Malawatch was, I think, thought of as somebody who would be more prospect than player, but he was a real player at Duke. He struggled in the Final Four against Houston. That was the last visual you have of him, at least in an organized basketball game that mattered, and he did not perform well. It was 0 rebounds. I mean, you're 7'2" with a 7'6" wingspan. You can't grab one. Some of that was because he's playing against Houston and they're just tough and strong and old, and it was a bad situation for him. But I think once you look at the entirety of the tape and don't get too caught up on the last impression, but take a total picture of what you saw, in the most basic terms, what he is an unusually sized human who can move unusually well for somebody that size. Just stop right there.
Yeah.
Take the basketball stuff, set it over here. There aren't many people on the planet who look like that and can move like that.
Yeah.
Regardless of what they do for a living, there just aren't many people like this that exist.
Yeah.
And as we watch in these playoffs, you saw in the Eastern Conference Finals, the Knicks have to get bigger.
Yeah.
You see when teams try to go small, the Lakers did it and just got ran over by Rudy Gobert.
Yeah.
There is still real value, as modern as the game has gotten and how awesome those championship warriors could be by playing small. There's still a real place in the NBA for people like this.
Yeah.
They're 7'2", they can move their feet, they can rim protect, alter shots, be in the way, catch lobs.
Yeah.
Maybe they're not the most skilled person in the world, but they can do things that nobody else can do just because of their physical gifts, and that's why he's going to be taken in the lottery. He had a nice freshman season, I think better than expected, and I don't know that he'll ever develop into the most modern center in the history of the NBA, or people will refer to him as a unicorn or the next Wembanyama.
Yeah.
But he serves a purpose that teams need, and he'll be selected very high because of it.
Thinking about his size and how it translates to the NBA, these days everybody has to shoot, right? You got to be a shooter. You got to be able to stretch the floor.
You need to at least be a threat in theory. Not everybody is, but you need to.
Well, we saw the Grizzlies try it with Zach Edey this year, earlier in the season, and by the end of the year, they were like, all right, just play your game, go out there and headhunt and get rebounds and block shots and all that. Malawatch shot 25% from threes. I think he only took 4, and he made 1 out of the 4. Is that going to be a problem in his career going forward? Just or if he can't shoot, so what? Like, he does all these other things well. Like you mentioned, he's big, he can run, he can.
Yeah, like I would prefer him to shoot 37% from 3 on 6 attempts per game.
Yeah.
If he did that, he'd maybe be the number 1 pick. Okay, so like this is what we're talking about. He's probably never going to take as many threes as a Jaren Jackson Jr. or make as many as a Karl Anthony Towns.
Yeah.
But these men are still useful.
Yeah.
I know everybody would love to draft Victor Wembanyama.
Sure.
Because he's taller than everybody and he can also move his feet and he can also shoot it. And oh my God, that's the future MVP of the league type of thing.
Yeah.
This young man isn't that, but turn on basketball any night. You're going to see moments in every game where you need more rim protection, you need a bigger body, you need somebody who can catch lobs, you need somebody who can just be physically imposing, who can just be this. Duke, one of the things that made them so great this past season, it wasn't just the talent, it was the length. Mm-hmm. They were the tallest team in the country. Yeah. Not literally the tallest at every position, but on average, the tallest team in the country at the 5 positions. Nobody shorter than 6'6" in the starting lineup. They just got really big everywhere. Mm-hmm. That's hard to deal with.
Yeah.
And so I think we went through a little phase where it was like traditional centers are bad, don't touch them. And I think we've come out the other side of that.
Yeah.
They're not ideal, but you show me a man this size with this length who can rim protect and catch lobs and move his feet well enough to switch ball screens, and I'll show you somebody that's going to make hundreds of millions of dollars playing basketball.
Yeah. Well, one of the guys who can shoot from that Duke team was Kon Knueppel, who shot 40% from threes during the regular season for Duke. Sort of like that kind of throwback small forward who can shoot and stretch the floor a little bit. But he's also a good playmaker and does other things well too. Of all these guys from Duke, how do you contextualize Knueppel in the way that you think he fits into the NBA?
He was so overshadowed at Duke because he was teammates with Cooper Flagg.
Yeah.
So it didn't really matter what he did there. He was never going to be the focus of anything, the face of anything. He was going to always be the Robin to that Batman.
Yeah.
I'm not comparing them as players, and certainly not comparing them in terms of style of play. But once upon a time, Scottie Pippen was always just Robin to Michael Jordan's Batman. And then Michael Jordan decided he was going to go play baseball for a little while. And if you didn't already know it, you were then hit in the face with it. Oh, my God, this guy could be an MVP as well. Yeah. Okay, now that Jordan's not there, this guy is an MVP caliber player. I genuinely believe that you take Cooper Flagg off of that Duke team and just say, this is Duke this year, and Kon Knueppel's their best player. They would have still been really good. Not as good, clearly, but really good. Top 10 good. And he would have been like a All-American. He would have, those 14.4 points would have turned into 18.3.
Yeah.
You shoot the same percentages, above 40% from three, but on more attempts.
Yeah.
You know, you're an All-American at Duke, and you're the face of the thing. He just happened to enroll at the same time as somebody he was never going to be able to take that from.
Yeah.
But he was excellent. And I think that the thing people focus on so much is the shooting that you can sort of fall into a trap of going, oh, he's a great shooter. He's a shooter. Yeah, but he's not just a shooter.
Yeah.
Like, he can bounce it a little bit. He's a plus defender. He's a better athlete than some might think for whatever reason. And he's a real basketball player.
Yeah.
And you saw that a little bit when Flagg went down late in the season temporarily. Like, it was, they were still fine in large part because of him. So he's excellent. And I don't know that he's ever going to be the best player on a great team in the NBA, but you need really good secondary players and really good number twos and really good number threes. Yeah. He already showed he could be perhaps the best number two in all of college basketball last season. Yeah. And if we look up in 5 years and he's a top three player on a contender in one conference or the other, that won't surprise me, because he has that one skill that is more valuable than any other skill in the NBA these days, and that's the ability to just make shots from the perimeter. Threes count more than twos, and he can make those. There's an emphasis on taking them, and he's the type of guy who can make a bunch. But he can do more than just make shots. If you start talking about him as just a shooter, you are selling him wildly short of what his talent actually suggests.
It's easy to do that. I mean, he basically had a 40, 50, 90 season for Duke this year, which is,
crazy.
Rare air. But if we're going to talk about him as more than a shooter, then my question with him is defense. Like, is he going to be able to play defense well enough to stay on the court?
Well, that is the problem you run into when you do start discussing prospects who are just shooters.
Yeah.
Because I don't care how great of a shooter you are. Like, you could literally win every three-point shooting contest that they hold anywhere.
Yeah.
But if you can't do some other stuff, specifically guard your position, then it just becomes difficult for you to play. Like, not to mix sports, but you see these long drive golf competitions all the time. Well, the guy who wins those is not the guy who wins the Masters.
Sure, yeah.
Like, okay, man, you're this great off the tee. Well, that don't mean nothing if you can't
do the rest of it. Yeah.
You got to be able to do the rest of it, or at least do enough of it to keep you in a position to do that.
Yeah.
There's a long list of incredible shooters, guys that would shoot 40%, above 40% from three in the NBA, but you can't keep them on the court.
Yeah.
They can't play. Yeah. I don't think he's going to be that. I like, everybody in the world, including Sam Presti, has been wrong about prospects before, so I'm not going to speak in absolutes. I don't think he'll ever be first team all defense or second or third, but can he guard his position well enough to stay on the floor?
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think he showed that at Duke. I think there's some advanced metric stuff that suggests and underline that, and he's not the best defender available on draft night.
Yeah.
But I think he can be a competent defender in the NBA, and I think most front office people would agree with that assessment. He can be competent, and that might be all he needs to be.
Yeah.
Like, competent is good enough.
As long as you can shoot, yeah.
Competent can be good enough.
Yeah.
Like, when you talk about bad defensive teams in the NBA, it is usually because they have too it could be just a lack of cohesion, togetherness, effort, all that stuff. But a lot of times it's just because they have too many guys who can get hunted. And I guess you could hunt him, but he's not the guy you're going to pick on over and over again. If you think Kon Knueppel is going to be a bust in the NBA, maybe you'll be right. I don't know. But I don't think it'll be because we find out you just can't keep that guy on the court because he's getting hunted every possession. I don't think that'll be his reality.
Yeah. Well, the other guy who we've included in this Duke trio of guys we're talking about who actually never played at Duke and I don't think he's ever going to enroll at Duke. But we're considering him a Duke guy, Cedric Coward, who went to a couple of other schools before this, was at Washington State last year, was going to go to Duke, and then, like you mentioned earlier, went to the NBA draft combine. His measurements were awesome. Everything else about him looks awesome. And now he's announced this week that he's staying in the draft and not going to go to Duke at all.
This is how advanced the scouting is at the NBA level. As you know, I host a college basketball podcast for CBS Sports. We do 3 episodes a week during the season. I don't think I've literally ever said Cedric Coward's name until the past few weeks as he became a target for Duke and then a legitimate NBA prospect. So how does he even get into this position? He only played he played 2 years. He played 1 year of non-Division I, 2 years at Eastern Washington, then transferred to Washington State, and only appeared in 6 games. So he's a totally anonymous basketball player for the entire world outside of the little worlds where he's lived. But he was on NBA radars, and it's just because I'm just going to tell you a couple. This is all you need to know. 6'6". If I just told an NBA front office this, they'd be like, okay, let's see it. 6'6", 38.5 vertical, wingspan 7'2", 7'3", great athlete, shot 40% from 3 on 5 attempts per game. Just what I said is enough to get you in the conversation. All right? Just like we need to look at that. In baseball, this is a thing all the time. You just look at numbers. And the numbers are so off the chart. It's just like, we need to go see this. There is somebody today working in baseball who is going to see somebody today who is a prospect, and they're going to see them only because the numbers suggest we need to go look at this. And it could be anything from velocity let's just talk pitching. The velocity is at a certain level.
Spin rate
is at a certain level. The contact stuff isn't really there. People aren't hitting him hard. He's not getting barreled up. Let's just go look at this and see what it looks like in person. Cedric Coward had a lot of that kind of stuff where it was just like, let's go see this. And then he went to the combine and it was just like, okay, we see it. And now he's good to go. He's, barring a surprise, going to be a first-round pick. And this happens in a way that it doesn't cost Duke dramatically because they just went out and got another likely one-and-done dude. Duke will be fine. But when Duke targeted Cedric Coward, made him an NIL offer, and secured the commitment, they did not think he would do so well at the combine that it would be difficult for him to turn around. But he measured the way he needed to measure, jumped the way he needed to jump, shot it the way he needed to shot it, did all the things he needed to do. And now, despite only playing 6 games at what we would traditionally call the high major level, even though Washington State Pac-12 is not really a thing anymore, after only playing 6 games at what we would call the high major level, he's going to be picked in the top 30 based off of some number stuff and some measurement stuff and some movement stuff, and this is the way the draft works.
So it sounds like of these guys we've been talking about, it sounds like Knueppel's the one who could probably have the most immediate impact.
I think he's most ready. I mean, I would just go back to, I think you could drop Kon Knueppel in any college basketball game last year, and he would, be ready to go. And we know you couldn't drop Kaman Malawatch into any game last year because we dropped him into the Houston game and he got overwhelmed. And if you can get overwhelmed by Houston's bigs, well, good luck. He's very young. It's going to take a minute, I think. He'll do some stuff and have some moments, but that's going to be one. Don't look up until year 3. Yeah. Let's talk in year 3 and see where we're at with that thing. Maybe earlier than that. Derek Lively was not great in his 1 year at Duke and was an immediate contributor for a team that was in the NBA Finals. So maybe I'm selling the young man a little short. But it's going to be a little bit of a process with him. Cedric Coward, we'll see. Like, I'd be lying if I told you I ever sat down and watched him play basketball a whole game. He played 6 games at Washington State. I've seen all the highlights. I know all the numbers.
It's like Ace Bailey, right? It's just the highlight tape of the guy.
Yeah, but it's just
we've never seen the other stuff.
Like most people didn't even know who Cedric Coward was 6 weeks ago. That's the truth. All right. Yeah. But he's old enough and athletic, and I could see him on the court. I think it's going to be slowest for Malawatch, fastest for Kon Knueppel, and Coward's sort of in between. Yeah. But Kon Knueppel, yes, would be the one that I think is obviously, like we've talked about before, who picks you, who's on your team, who's your coach. Yeah. Do they just here in Memphis, we had 2 coaches this year, unfortunately. Yeah. I don't mean that in any other way than you just never want to have 2 coaches in the same year. Sure. That means something didn't go right. If you ever have 2 coaches in the same season, something didn't go right. Yeah. We had 2 coaches this year. They used Zach Edey totally different ways. Mm-hmm. So who is the coach that gets to decide how to use a Kon Knueppel? Yeah. Who is the coach that gets to decide how to use a Khaman Maluach? What franchise? Who are the team? Are you going to a place where they need Jalen Wells is a great example of this. Yeah.
Okay. That's what I keep thinking of this whole time.
Jalen Wells
Washington State too.
And I talked to Jalen. I had Jalen in the studio recently, and off air, I was like, hey, because they both are Washington State alums. Yeah. Like when Cedric Coward is picked, you'll hear this on draft night. And this is the second straight year a Washington State alum has been picked in the NBA draft. Last year, of course, Jalen Wells went 39th to the Grizzlies. Like that will be said by Jay Billis or somebody. But they never played together. Yeah. And so, but I did ask Jalen. I was like, "You know him?" And he's like, "Yeah, I know him. I know him. I've seen him. He's good." He's like, "There's a relationship there on some level." Yeah. But if Jalen Wells goes to a different franchise, he's not starting on a playoff team.
Sure. Yeah.
If he goes to a different playoff team, he's probably not starting just because what other playoff teams are starting? Rookies. So Jalen Wells fell into a spot where you had a franchise that believed in him, injuries that opened up possibilities, and then he ran through it. He took advantage of it. But Jalen Wells' incredible rookie season, a lot of it is the byproduct of just he landed in a great spot for him. Yeah. He landed on a contender. He landed with a playoff caliber team, and then he happened to play a position where he could fill a real need because Vince Williams was hurt, Marcus Smart was hurt, Marcus Smart wasn't as good as he should have been, all of these things. So that always comes into play. But if Kon Knueppel lands with the right team and with the right coach and in the right situation, I think he could have an impact just like that.
Well, it sounds like that's going to be a big part of all 3 of these guys is wherever they land, what kind of impact they're able to have and what kind of fit, whatever franchise they end up with. All right, that takes us through the Dukies. We've still got a bunch more shows to get to here on the Grind City Media Draft Board Breakdown. For Gary Parrish, I'm Lang Whitaker. You're watching the Grind City Media Draft Board Breakdown, brought to you by Southland Casino.